It's good to be with you this morning as we remember St. Januarius, and we'll hopefully have a chance to talk about him a bit. You can hopefully see the resemblance of his name to January, right? And it's clearly a Roman name, so he is one of the Roman saints. And so we'll start with just looking at the first reading. Today we have an interesting selection, right, from St. Paul to Timothy. You continue to read Paul's kind of advice to the young Timothy, who is a bishop in the early church. And what you have to understand is that in this very, prototypical stage of the Catholic Church, there is a lot that is not defined yet, because the church has a charism of governance that she exerts, and that over time she is free to define her structures more and more clearly, and also to do that in the face of different challenges, of different opportunities, so to speak. Yet in a seminal form, these things, these charisms and gifts are already present. As we know, our Protestant brothers and sisters would not agree with us necessarily that Jesus willed to institute the offices of episcopate, right, of bishop, of presbyter, priest, of deacon, of all these things, and that, and so our answer to that can be that he wills to institute them, but he also wills to allow his church to govern them, right? To govern them. And that just allows us to see the church's growth as this living body over time. And so as we look at our reading today, it's talking about first the qualifications of a bishop and then one of a deacon. And as you heard, initially celibacy, priestly celibacy, was not mandatory for bishops, right? This is a discipline. It's not a doctrine of the church. Yet the Eastern and Western fathers do testify that this discipline spread. It became a voluntary practice of the sacred ministers as a way of being consecrated fully to the church and to the people that we serve. And so it did not take a very long time for celibacy for the clergy to become a defined discipline that was eventually expected. And so, because they talk about different things here, and, it says that a bishop must not be a drunkard, like that would be a good requirement for every Christian, right? But the thing is again, this is an early stage, but you see the beginnings of it. And then it moves on to deacons. And I think maybe, or I can tell you one of the things I've definitely noticed is that among our people, there's a huge amount of confusion as to what the diaconate is, right? So we'll kind of look at that a little bit. Deacons are ministers under bishops and priests. It is not appropriate to call a deacon father, all right? That is not appropriate. Sometimes I hear that, and that's not okay. A deacon can be called deacon or deacon first name, deacon last name, depending on how well you know him. It goes back to the 7 men of good repute who were chosen freely, elected freely by the apostles in Acts chapter 6 to continue the work. And it's completely obvious from that passage that the deacons' roles of aiding the poor and the sick and preaching and ministries like this are within, are under the care of the bishops. It's obviously something that is meant to serve the bishops, the whole church. And so when a man is progressing toward becoming a priest, he will be ordained a deacon. That is a stage of his journey. They used to have what they would call 7 ordinations before Vatican II, and they changed that language partly because not all of them were ordinations. It was a bit confusing. They called them ordinations or grades of holy orders. And nevertheless, every man who is a priest is ordained a deacon first. So I was ordained a deacon in 2014, a priest in 2015. A deacon is a deacon no matter what. But what happened was Pope Paul VI authorized the reestablishment of the permanent diaconate by national bishops' conferences. He consulted with them in 1967. And so what happened is in 1967, the church decided that we would bring back having men that were ordained to the diaconate, and that's where they would stop. We weren't going to try to make them priests. That was enough for those men. And then, so after 1967, that was then adopted by the different conferences. Like, I don't think the Diocese of Jackson established it until a bit later, and then Biloxi. And we have many excellent men that are in formation for the diaconate. They're also their wives part of that. But so the permanent diaconate is when they stop. They stop at that point and they serve in the parish. And then a transitional deacon is no less a deacon. He's a man who remains a deacon, but he becomes a priest when he's called to become a priest later. So I hope this makes it clear to you the differences, because again, I know a lot of people do struggle with these differences. And then finally, we look at our reading maybe from the gospel, and this is a beautiful little story, right? That we encounter. Jesus raises a widow's son at Nain. Nain is a small Galilean village about 6 miles southeast of Nazareth. It is not otherwise mentioned in the Bible, and you have to kind of understand that there's a few things going on here. This woman, for her to lose her son, meant that she lost her source of livelihood, right? Because in this society, women had no rights, and this was a very bad situation for her to be in. It basically put her completely at the mercy of her local community for her survival. And so Jesus just raises the man to life. There's very little dialogue in this one. And I want to mention that in a way, though, that the young man is kind of an image of Christ himself, right? That he is raised back to life, right? He will be resurrected. He will resurrect himself later on after his cruel passion and death. And so this kind of random young man is kind of an image too of Jesus, who was crucified at this kind of young age. And in that sense, there is the joy that the mother experiences having her son restored to her. And it made me think of how in Christ, in his resurrection, that we are restored to God. We're restored to Holy Mother Church. And so the saints found in the image of the grieving mother, the image of Holy Mother Church, that wants to see her children return to her and gathered into the heavenly kingdom. So as we continue this day, and to allow ourselves to glorify God for the works of renewal that he does perform in our lives and lives of other people, and to understand, how does the church work? How does holy orders work? Can I accept that in humility? Must I fight with it? Can I accept that this is how God willed to organize his church? And can I be a disciple of this church? Can I be someone who continues to build up others in their Catholic identity?